Welcome to the American Small Business League podcast. I am Bruce DeTorres, and with me is Sanjyot Dunung or Dunung? Tell me.
Dunung.
Okay, it's great. I got your first name right, but
Yes, you do.
that's from the coaching from your website, which, by the way, folks, is SANJYOT for Congress.com. Running for Congress as a Democrat in Illinois' 8th District. And Sanjot is a small business founder and social scientist, policy expert, educator, military mom, author, caregiver, running because, quote, families in our district deserve experienced, solutions driven leadership grounded in facts, evidence, and real world experience, not slogans or political theater, end quote. Sanjot, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you, Bruce, and very nice to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise, let's start. Please tell me all about you, no rush. All about why you're running and what you want to do for your district, no rush.
Happy to, and I look forward to the questions and the interaction. So, thank you. Yes, my name is Sanjyot. Rhymes with vote. So, hopefully, it's a super easy way for people to remember as they go into the ballot box on March 17th and earlier. As you said, yes, I am. I juggled raising three boys. My youngest is in the Air Force. I have a small business, education technology. I'll tell you a little bit about that as well. And I juggle taking care of my aging and disabled parents. So I really get what our families are going through. I also had the opportunity to serve on the former President Biden's foreign policy working groups, helping to boost small business exports, really thinking, how can we be doing a better job of really leveling the playing field and helping small businesses? And then I continue to serve on the National Small Business Association, the largest nonpartisan business advocacy in DC, really focusing on policies that strengthen small businesses and create jobs. And then I also serve on Truman Center for National Policy, which is about principled foreign policy. And I look forward to talking about that too. But a lot of people sort of think, how do the two dovetail? And the truth is they do. Economic and national security are intertwined. Our small businesses are facing that very issue right now as we talk about tariffs, as we talk about uncertainty. The folks who are most impacted by the up and downs are small businesses because we don't tend to have the cushions that a larger company may have to be able to weather out those storms. And so we really need to be thinking about what's the impact on small businesses? How do we strengthen them? And how do we make sure um, that we don't just talk about starts? A lot of times people always love to quote, we helped start so many small businesses in our district or our state. But really, what small businesses need are ongoing support. We know from our data that small businesses face the hardest terrain in the first 3 to 5 years. Most small businesses fail in those 3 years. So it's a different cocktail of programs. Certainly, capital is one of them. But we really want to talk about mentorship and coaching and how do you help small businesses with networks. I love the fact that you are so very focused on making sure that we level the playing field for small businesses, government contracting, and happy to get into that in a moment about just how unfair that playing field actually is for small businesses, women, and all small businesses, and what we can do to improve it. So that is in large part why I'm running. I really got very frustrated with the lack of common sense solutions. It's not to suggest that problems are easy, but we really aren't focused on solving them. Everybody's, sort of more focused on performative and sort of sound bites rather than coming together, sitting at the table and saying, what do we really need to do across the aisle that's solutions driven, that really focuses on making sure we strengthen. Small businesses are the backbone of our community. 90% of the jobs come from small businesses. They're the fabric of when you go into your communities and your towns, whether it's the retail store on the street corner or whether it's a printer. And by the way, we use small businesses for everything, whether it's our printing or whether it's goods, any kind of services. So I'm happy to talk a little bit about what do we really mean by small businesses? Because I think that's a misnomer too. Small businesses are everything from a sole proprietor. We were actually just filming some commercials yesterday, and the film studio is a small business. The makeup company is also a small business, but then a printing company, a manufacturing company, a doctor's office, dental offices, small businesses run the gamut. And so we really need to be thinking about how do we strengthen this very wide group of industry-wide kinds of companies, but also make sure that we're coming back to what does it mean for our communities? How do we make sure we strengthen them so that they can stay in our communities, grow, hire more people, access more business? But I'm happy, Bruce, to sort of answer a few questions and start some dialogue with you.
You're wonderful. And before continuing where you just left off, all about small businesses, please tell us, please, your professional career highlights and particular skills, expertise, and top issues. If not small business, what are the first things you're telling your district? Listen,
Yes.
this is what I want to do for you.
Yeah, so certainly small business is one, but I will let you know that I've had a small business that's gone through two evolutions, as most small businesses do. We are an education learning company. We create videos and learning content that are used at the college and workforce training. We were delighted. It's called ATMA. Global, and we were delighted a couple of years ago to win Fast Company's Most Innovative Companies of the Year, Small and Mighty. It is a badge I wear with great honor. And it was for a product called Atma Insights, which is basically like Netflix for global learning. It's used by professors in the classroom, and it's also used by corporations. And I've really been very focused on making sure that we stay true to our mission. We love creating products. I'm a social scientist by training. What that really means is simply helping understand how culture, education, global affairs, technology, and business impact our society, our communities, and really making sure that we empower the next generation of students and professionals with the skill set that they need, the toolkit, if you will. With information, knowledge, and training so that they can do their jobs better. I like to say I'm a professional bridge builder. So a lot of our content is about how do you do business in different countries? How do you do business with folks who may have different ways of negotiating, ways of managing teams, ways of conducting a project? So companies and educators use our products to really help hone in those kinds of skills. I got into that because I was very fascinated with the fact that people communicate differently based on their background. We see it here in the US, but we also see it globally. And many of the companies that we work with have global offices, they have global teams, some of the largest Fortune 100. We also do a lot on customer service with airlines, with hotels, because they're trying to make sure they do a very good job in meeting their customer service needs across their different diverse backgrounds. So we're really pleased that for many of our hospitality customers, we've helped them improve their customer service metrics by making sure that their frontline employees can actually deliver more culturally competent, more just sort of really in tune with what their global customers are looking for, whether a flight attendant or whether they are a hotel staff member. And it does impact the bottom line of our largest customers. We've also been a government contractor, so I can speak to that whole GSA process. We do have up my insights on the GSA and what we can do to actually improve and make it easier for companies to be able to access some of those different things. So it's that first tier of experience that I bring. I think that when small business owners our policymakers, we understand sort of the day-to-day challenges. You know what it's like to have to worry about making payroll, or if you are about to get a new customer, yay, that's exciting, or lose a new customer, right? So you really know what it means to actually be in the trenches on a day-to-day, to see your costs go up and down, to see the marketplace changing. And I think that Congress needs more small business owners. I'll leave you with a fun, it's not a fun stat, it's a real stat. 40% of Congress are made up of lawyers. Now, I have a lot of friends who are lawyers. That is wonderful. Uh, but it's over indexed, right? What that lawyerly mindset is really about creating boundaries and really sort of protecting things versus I think small business owners bring in an innovation mindset, a little more creativity, which is something that's important to me. And what does that mean? We don't ask, should we do something? The answer is, how do we do it, right? How do we make it easier for small businesses to grow? How do we make it easier for more small businesses to access government contracts? How do we make it easier to make sure that small businesses can grow across generations in the same community? So I think how we problem solve is very different. And it's that problem solving that we need more of
Mhm.
in Congress. And so that's another reason why I'm running.
How did you get into or get invited into the president's panel? What wave of either success or notoriety propelled you into that or earned you the place there?
Thank you. So it was on the foreign policy working groups, and it was really specifically focused on small businesses, which is where I have been making some headlines in terms of just being known as somebody who understands that. I'm an educator too. I happen to write a few textbooks, international business and global management. So it's bringing that educator's mindset along with policy and lived experience as a small business owner that put me into that panel and that environment. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we actually proposed, and part of it was implemented, is a digital dashboard. So, what does that mean? Um, until now, and we still have this, if you are a small business owner and you are based anywhere in the US and you want to export, you typically have to go into your small business local development office if you want to get information on exports. Maybe you call the SBA, but maybe you want some very specific information. You have a particular manufacturing part. You want to be able to export it to a country. I think that time is here now that everything should be digital and it should be equal access to information. So it shouldn't matter if you are sitting in the state of New York or California, or if you're in Idaho or Iowa or Oklahoma. You should be able to access the experts for that country and for that product. And we have that in the US um, Export Import Office. We have that with our foreign commercial service officers. So a digital dashboard would have and would still, hopefully the next part gets implemented, part of it did, would allow you to be able to sit wherever you are. You don't need to go into an office because, quite frankly, how many small business owners have time during the day to walk into a small business office between 9 and 5 and get the information they need? They want to be able to research it on their time, but you should be able to get the information you need for the country and for the item that you are trying to export. So if you're a cattle exporter out of Montana, right? And you want to go into Japan or you want to expand in Japan, you should be able to get that level of expertise. And that's what a
It would
digital
help.
dashboard would do.
Yeah, it would help at the nationwide thing. Allow me, please, to get on the table the things we wrote you about
Yes.
so I can hear what you think about those things and would propose about them. Um, your appreciation of small business is fantastic. We feel not enough people know that we are a small business nation
Yes.
by the following measures. 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses by the federal government's pretty wrong, we think, definition of up to 500 employees. 99.9% the federal government considers a small business by that measure. 98% have less than 100 employees.
Yeah.
We think that ought to be the working definition for all federal purposes. And here's why. The law says that 23% of all federal contract dollars must go to small businesses. And every year, the government tells us through the SBA, who is responsible for making sure this happens, we met the goal, we exceeded the goal. However, our decades of experience, freedom of information, legal battles won, really a record number of over 110, have found that as we in our experience we see that almost all federal contracts go to big businesses, that in reality maybe around 3% of those contracts go to legitimate small businesses, 100 up to 100 employees, meaning around 1/10 of 1% of the businesses in America that are big businesses with more than 500 employees get around 97% of the federal contract dollars every year. Billions of dollars in work that they don't create new jobs for because they're already big. Whereas if legitimate small businesses got that business, those contracts, that revenue, they would create a couple of million new jobs on top of the jobs America typically creates, and
Yeah.
all our communities would flourish. And our project Don't Cheat Women highlights our request. We want Congress to raise from 5% to 15% the federal contracts that must go to women owned small businesses. Only twice in the last 30 years has the government said, we almost hit 5%.
Right.
We don't believe that. Based on our experience, and also dozens of congressional investigations have found the diversion of small business contracts to big businesses. And the SBA's own Office of Inspector General has issued many reports saying big businesses are getting small business contracts. We see every year that women owned small businesses probably don't even get 1% of those contracts. And here's the political hot button we're trying to push. Women obviously are half the population. I actually hear more regularly. More than half the population are women, but they own 40% of all businesses in America. And
Yeah.
most importantly, they sell what the government buys. They
Yeah.
own over 14 million businesses. They generate almost $3 trillion in revenue. They employ over 12 million people. No one is going to say, oh, it's okay. The government says women get 5% of the contracts, which, as I say, they don't even get 1%. And here's what else is at stake: political equality is at stake because men earn and save more than women. They dominate politically. First of all, they donate far more to candidates, so they've got more influence with the
Yeah.
winners. And of course, they run for and win office more than women. Roughly 75% of all seats in the House, the Senate, every president's cabinet, all state legislatures are held by men. Almost that many governor chairs and 90% of committee chair and party leadership positions are held by men. And they have different worldviews, propensities, principles, generally speaking, in important ways than women. Half the human race in America needs to have equal participation and presence in the laws and the policies that govern our country for us to consider ourselves civilized, let alone sane.
Yes.
That's why we want everyone to go to don'tcheatwomen.com, see these facts and figures, see the letter you can swipe, see the links to click to find your senators and your congressperson and the White House and Kelly Loeffler, administrator of the Small Business Administration, and bombard them with this and say, fix this. Fix this. It's an election year. You yourself, we are reaching out to almost 2,000 candidates like yourself, teaching them this. Many like you write back and say, this is great. And then we vet the ones we want to talk to. We try to talk to as many as we can on our podcast. We haven't scratched the surface yet in
Right.
order to give you, Sanjot, on a silver platter, the encouragement to talk about the federal contracts that must go to small businesses. Now I take a deep breath and I listen to your reply to that from any angle, way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Bruce. That's a ton of information. I agree with it completely. And I think that the way we start to attack that nut, if you will, is let's first start. So yes, we definitely need to revise the definition. I have seen firsthand too many entities sort of creating sub businesses, if you will, to meet that 500 threshold. And then suddenly all of them are DoD contractors. And they're not real small businesses, right? DoD contracting, for example, to add to your stats. If you are a tech vendor, you can be a small business up into about 70 million. So there's a big difference between 7 million and 70 million and 700,000. And we need to acknowledge that it's skewed towards the $70 million vendors, and it is not a fair level playing field. The first place we really need to attack it, and this is something I'm going to propose if and when I am elected, is to really review the contracting process. One of the worst things that we've done is sort of get into a mechanism in Congress and in the government that spends money sort of the way we spent money 10, 20, 30 years ago. And the contracting system in the government is the same way. So what do I mean by that? So a couple of the biggest problems are that contracting officers can actually label projects and new RFPs with NAICS codes, but they can hide the true intent of those NAICS codes by using a classification of 000, for example, or 999. So it's not a real NAICS code that a small business will know to search for if they're not familiar with that tactic. Another thing that they do is they allow existing vendors to help create the next RFP. And what that happens is the vendor will create obstacles, right? They will create a specification or a requirement that only they can fulfill. So in essence, when it goes out to RFP, which is request for proposal, and a small business says, hey, wow, I can do that, and you put in your response, you may not have the same specification as the existing vendor, and therefore you will be at a disadvantage. So that's another thing that we need to fix. The third is that there's a concept called past performance in the government. So what that means is the government will only give contracts to people with past performance in the government. If you have past performance with private sector clients, even if you have some of the biggest ones and they give you glowing recommendations, not good enough. We need to fix that. It is a barrier for businesses, especially women-owned businesses, but all small businesses in order to get. And as taxpayers, as folks who are actually helping to fund every project, we want to know that our government is spending the money wisely and efficiently with the latest ideas, the latest pricing, and the best technology. This becomes a barrier for new companies to be able to do business with the government. We need to fix that. So if you have a new small business, and many women have started businesses more recently for a wide range of reasons, they don't necessarily have an equal opportunity because they don't have the history of past performance of
Mhm.
10, 15, 20 years as some of the existing contracting business, whether you are a construction or whether you're an environmental systems contractor or whether you're doing any of those other things. So I think the first step to being able to fix the problems that you very correctly outlined is let's start with the federal contracting business. One of the other things that I want to do is I want to institute, and I will propose a policy of 5 and 10 year audits. So, most businesses, small and large, have some form of audit. We want efficiencies. We want to root out waste.
Mhm.
It's also a way to see, does a vendor have an unfair advantage with a particular contract, and are they able to sort of continue staying in it without necessarily being the most efficient? These are the kinds of ways that we will be able to get more small businesses in.
And,
And then
and
the other way, the
mhm,
third I'll give you, is that for DoD and for some of the other small business contracts, I have been surprised and dismayed to see that the government uses sort of um, a, a not-for-profit model, which says that they're going to actually give contracts to universities over small businesses. And that is an unfair playing field. Universities do not belong in the same category as small businesses, and they can absorb save overhead and administrative costs that a small business needs to be able to actually charge the government. They do it through a site called grants.gov. And so I really want to make sure the SBA starts to cut down and really monitor the grants.gov site, because small businesses are losing contracts that they can deliver. It might be
mhm.
training, it might be product, it might be services in their communities, and they're losing it to a local college because of the unfairness of that pricing mechanism.
That was thrilling actually, because you mentioned a couple of ways that small businesses don't get the federal contracts that they could and should that I wasn't aware of. Lloyd Chapman, the man who created the American Small Business League, um, has taught me, brought me on board as director of communications, and has taught me a lot of the ways that they can dare to claim that they meet the 23% goal every year. In addition to the things you said, there's also the problem that many agencies, sometimes I think I've heard up to half of federal agencies, are just simply exempt from the small business
Yes.
contracting requirement. And for whatever reasons they give, they sound facetious to us.
Right.
So naturally, if you're giving just a tiny couple of budget contracts from a shrunken pool, by other fudging, you can say, "Oh, that's 23% of that total." Like, wait a minute, what
Right.
happened to all these? And also, and I bet you're aware of this, the myriad federal agencies have different requirements,
Yes.
rules, and stipulations that say, well, and you mentioned the NAICS codes, which is the North American Industrial Classification or code system. They say, well, because we're buying a contract for this particular service or these particular products, this particular industry, we can award a small business contract to a company that has 1,000, 5,000. There have been small business contracts that have gone to companies with a global presence and
Yes.
26,000 employees. So there's also decades of wink, wink, nudge,
Yes.
nudge going on. One more example is the revolving door between a contracting officer at a federal agency throwing a contract to a giant corporation, telling the SBA that's one of our small business contracts. So the SBA is happy. That business is grateful for the contract that they really shouldn't have gotten because it should have gone to a small business. A new administration comes in, or someone just wants a change of pace. That contracting officer quits, looks for a job. The company he's been steering big contracts to is happy to hire him to do what? To solicit contracts from the federal agency that he just worked for. So it's a money ground. And I often say we need to know about more fraud or a scandal at the federal government. Like we need a hole in the head because it's a fire hose of problems. But a candidate like you to address small business issues who's this knowledgeable about this very specific opportunity to expose this, clean this up. One of our asks at don'tcheatwomen.com is clean house and expand the SBA. It shouldn't have
Yes.
one of the smallest budgets of the federal government. It should have one of the biggest, representing, as it does, 98 or 99% of all businesses in America, and greatly expand that budget, have many more offices, and also, as you said, how to find out what contracts are available and how to apply for them. At don'tcheatwomen.com, we have a resources page where we've collected the best, we think, of the public links that could teach a small business what contracts might be available, how do you apply for them. Warning, as you clickety click into these sites, it gets rather obtuse. It gets rather confusing.
Yes.
They don't make it easy. You gave an example. It's like they don't make it easy to
Yeah.
find out. Last point, you will appreciate of our 36 million small businesses, 32 million are in the NAICS codes that sell to the federal government. They all ought to. So if the federal government really cared about small businesses, they would broadcast far and wide, apply, find and apply for federal contracts. The economic boom it represents is worth everybody knowing and preaching and teaching about. What say you?
Absolutely, 110%. And I think the GSA program is well-intentioned but mismanaged. And I would agree with you. I think one of the biggest challenges with the GSA is the barriers to entry. It's very hard. It's administratively bureaucratic. It takes 12, 18 months to get on the schedule, tons of paperwork, and you end up having to probably hire somebody who, as you correctly said, was a contracting officer, comes off of it and then becomes a consultant. Now, small businesses shouldn't have to pay $5,000 or $10,000 to a consultant just to get on our own government's schedule when they already have product that they're willing to offer and sell to the government, meets the NAICS codes, is well priced. They provide the level of quality and customer service that anybody would be expecting. So we make it super hard, and part of it, it goes right back to entrenched interests. There are vendors who don't want competition. They want the government to keep overpaying, quite frankly. They want to be able to grow their business so that they're well beyond the small business stage. And they want to sort of pull up the ladder behind them and make sure no other small business
Mm.
can climb it fairly and get into it. And I would say maybe we start by saying that if you're going to head the SBA, maybe you should actually be a small business owner. Maybe you should have been in the trenches and not necessarily representing the investor class, so to speak. So I think that we need more small business voices in Congress, in government, and we need to be louder. So I would agree with all of the different points that you've raised.
I want to ask you a couple of things about the year and the campaign that you face going forward. I think you alluded to a primary in March, and we'll
Yes.
consider this, if it's okay, kind of like our last segment right here. No rush. Talk about what either this, what you're facing, the primary, who and your opposition, just broad strokes about that. And then I'm going to ask, what's the first thing you say to someone in your district who's not thinking about the congressional race coming up, so that they could appreciate who you are and what you want to do for them. So take on either of those.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, we do have a primary. It's less than 50 days away, which is why we're in campaign mode of Vote Sanjyot, which is why you see the screen drop. One of the things that I've been really pleased about, and it is very hard to get your name out quickly and get everybody to be aware, but I'm deeply rooted in our community. And most people value being a small business owner. I am uniquely the only one in this race with active small business experience, military mom, juggled, taking care of aging and disabled parents. So I kind of really understand the range of challenges that most people go through. And whether it's healthcare, whether it's affordable childcare, whether it's affordability in general, most people appreciate my lived experience. But then they also appreciate that I actually have federal experience and expertise focused on small business policies and economic security, because that's what it comes down to each and every day. I hear daily from people, they worry about jobs, they worry about AI and technology, they worry about it from a small business point of view. Will my business be out of date? Will I be under threat because of AI? Are there guardrails? I have two companies, as most small businesses do. I have a small publishing media company. And I do worry about intellectual property, especially for small businesses. Who's going to be protecting our interest, if we create a product or if we create content, we should be able to make sure that we own our intellectual property and it is recognized. And the big tech have pretty much decimated intellectual property laws. So we really need a stronger voice at that table to say we need a fair path forward. If you create a creative product, you're a writer, you're a photographer, maybe you actually have a business process, right? You're a consultant. It could be any number of things, but we need to protect the rights and the legal rights of small businesses. So that is a really important thing that I hear from a lot of small businesses, particularly in my district. I also hear a lot about, regardless of what side of the fence you're on, I'm one of those people who will talk to everybody. I don't really care how you voted in the last election because it's really about shared values and shared prosperity and coming together to make sure that we strengthen our communities. And so a lot of people want to share with me the worries that they have about sort of the chaos and uncertainty, no matter what their political persuasion, it's hitting their small business. I hear from people. I was surprised to hear a little bit from a hardware store 2 days ago, a hardware store, they own two or three of them, and their supplies were changing as they were coming in to the US. The pricing was changing as we speak. And while we certainly want to get to a point where we manufacture more in the US, there's a bridge that we need economically. Otherwise, it's small businesses who go out of business, and that we can't have. So we need to make sure that we're not going to be able to manufacture everything in the US. And we may not want to, but the things that we do, that's great and strengthen small businesses to be able to invest in those. But let's not penalize the small businesses who are doing a good shop. If you're a bike shop, if you are a hardware store, you rely on products from around the world or parts from around the world, and they can't see that level of chaos and uncertainty with pricing because it's impacting their bottom line. So a lot of people appreciate that I really understand firsthand exactly what those costs are and how it can impact their bottom line. One of the things that I say to people, and people say back in terms of their calculation, this is a Dem leaning district, although in today's world, I say nothing is guaranteed. It is a Dem leading district, but we can choose what kind of a Democrat we want to be in these seats. And I am uniquely, again, the only small business owner with lived experience who has that federal policy background. That's what people appreciate. They want to know that you've walked the walk and that you understand a very pragmatic, common sense solutions. So a lot of people are coming out. I encourage your viewers and your listeners to think about that wherever they live.
Yeah.
It is important to take a look in primaries what kind of person you're choosing, regardless of your party, because we want pragmatic, common sense folks who are going to go to DC, less show horses, more workhorses. And I think small business owners are definitely the workhorses that we need.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change and disruption going on,
Right.
and sometimes change can feel overwhelming. But we want to make sure that we have folks at the table who are making sense of short, medium, and long-term solutions. And I think small business owners like myself are the best folks to be at that table.
Sanjyot, thank you. Question. Who's representing the district now, and are you competing with them?
No, I am not. It's an open primary. The district is currently being served by Raja Krishnamurthy, who is running for Senate in Illinois. And he
Okay.
has an active primary as well. So it's a rare moment to have an open seat.
Right.
And certainly we have a lot of competition, but I am uniquely positioned.
Your website I found intuitive and also chock full. Tell us the URL again and tell me what you typically steer people to first on your website.
Absolutely. So the website is Sanjyot, Sanjyot for Congress. And there's a couple of pages that I would encourage you to take a look at. Obviously, the homepage, But then I would ask you to take a look at why I'm running. It will tell you a lot about what I hope to do in Congress, those 2 pages in particular. And then in the upper corner, you'll see some of our social media. Most importantly, I'm going to encourage you to take a look at our Substack, my Substack. I actually write this stuff. As I said earlier, I'm a writer. I love policy, and I am going to be deep diving. And in fact, in the next 2 weeks, I'll have a deep dive on what we need to do to strengthen small businesses on my Substack to really talk about how we deliver. As I said, I'm not performative. This is not an exercise in just racking up the most social media followers. This is about what are we going to do to actually deliver solutions that impact our communities, benefit our families, our Americans, and our small businesses at large, and also strengthen America for the long run, economic and national security.
I've really enjoyed this, and I hope you stay in touch. And we're going to talk after I kill the recording. Do you have any final brief words or questions?
No, if you like what you heard, I hope you'll spread the word. Follow us on social media, Sanjyot for Congress, and encourage anybody you know to vote, but vote. Most important thing is I think Americans need to start recognizing we have the power of our voice and our vote, and please exercise it.
Amen. I want to thank you again so very, very much. And I want to thank everybody for watching and listening today.
Thank you.